Draft pod, baby. We're doing it. Trying to figure out, do we believe the smoke that the Broncos aren't interested in a wide receiver early? I think my guy Jake Schwanitz has some real takes on this. Going through the best wide receivers in this class. Could T-Mac drop to the Broncos? And how does that second tier of wide receivers stack up against that second tier of running backs? Getting into it all now. DNVR Draft Pod. We're doing the thing on this glorious Thursday. Much like round one will come on our Thursday, so does the Draft Pod.
Soon enough.
Joined by my guy, Jake, the Schwan Man Schwanitz. Thank you for joining me.
Always, Drew.
We got Henry watching college hoops, watching his Grizz, which, sorry, Henry, did not work out for you. Better luck next time. But yeah, lots going on. It's a glorious day of sports. I've got soccer to worry about. I've got all these dogs. Then we were on that.
How we doing
that
so
grind.
far?
We got our first one. Very early
Juicy?
on. Not really. Creighton, a 9 seed over an 8 seed. So Creighton over Louisville, but Louisville, everyone said, was underranked. So should have been a 5 seed, the streets were saying. So in that sense, a good win for us. As far as the odds on Bet365 go, fine. We need some of these bigger dogs. Like if South Alabama could make a run here against Auburn, that'd go a long way for us.
Just need one. That's
exactly right. Come join us in the Toyota chat. We appreciate you all so much. And yeah, Jake, the topic of this was very easy for us to pick because I was like, what things are you hot about? And probably the thing you've been hottest about this offseason is that the Broncos do in fact have a wide receiver need, and it'd be crazy to not consider some of these wide out options at pick 20, at pick 51. And on top of that, we have Tetairoa McMillan, the top wide receiver. Still your wide receiver one in this class?
Outside of Travis, I think so.
Yeah, yes, samesies. He had a pro day, conflicting reports, 4.48s, 4.55s out there. Doesn't matter. Do you think it's realistic he drops? I want to unpack it all with you today on this glorious draft pod. We've got Riley Sorbo behind the ones and twos. Thank you, Riley, for all you do. Let's get into it, though, man.
Yeah.
It was Kuiper, right, who had him mocked to Tet. It's Kuiper or DJ, I forget.
Yeah, Kuiper's got him. DJ had Omarion Hampton.
Yep. So yeah, how realistic do you think T-Mac dropping is at this point in the draft process? Or is it all smoke and you don't believe a second of it?
I'm kind of torn. I do think that he's the type of player that people are just thinking way too much about right now. But I don't know. Sometimes this pre-draft buzz is true. So you never know what to believe. But for me, he was like a set and forget guy. Like, I don't care what he runs at his pro day. I really don't.
100%, especially if it's not in the 4.6s. Like low 4.5s, high 4.4s. Yep, don't care. Tracks with what the eye sees. Like, yep. He's a set and forget prospect. I was telling you guys in the lobby maybe a couple weeks ago, like for me, he's one of those guys I don't even need to go back and relook at the tape in the offseason. Like, I know who T-Mac is. Elite production for 2 seasons there. Production was the same when Arizona was one of the hottest teams in the country and when Arizona was one of the most disappointing teams in the country. He was Mr. Consistent. That size is just outlandish. he's got a smoothness to him
Yeah.
in his change of direction on routes, in his ability to adjust to the ball midair. He's got really sure hands, a savant in the contested catch and the spectacular acrobatic catch departments, which are one of the bigger indicators when I'm watching tape of a wide receiver and really thinking like, can they overcome the tough conditions that an NFL defense presents itself? To me, T-Mac just checks off all those boxes. So I think he'd be a slam dunk pick.
Absolutely. And I think he's exactly what Sean Payton's looking for in a wide receiver. Great ball skills and a frame that just can dominate physically. And you saw that from T-Mac in college multiple times. Going back to his freshman year, he did this stuff as a freshman, Dre. People forget about it.
Crazy.
And that's really when he got on my radar, and I was like, oh my God, like this guy is different, because Arizona did have some good receivers that year in 2022. Jacob Cowing was probably the biggest one.
And then there's the Singer guy, right?
Yeah, Dorian Singer had a great year that year. He goes off to USC, doesn't really do much. I think he's somewhere else now, actually, but...
He's the guy who transferred to Utah. He's the
right.
only touchdown Travis allowed in 2024.
Right.
So that was Dorian Singer, yeah.
And Tetairoa McMillan was making splash plays then. Like, that looked different than everyone else, and then he finally gets the production to follow these last 2 years. It's just, in terms of a fit for what Sean Payton wants to do offensively with the wide receivers, I think you could like play him as a big slot if you wanted to. You could have another red zone target. So he just checks a lot of the boxes that fit the Broncos mold, at least under Sean Payton, what they've been looking for at wide receiver.
100%. With Tet, what's come back to my mind over and over and over again, I think it was like 2 months ago, we did a show and we had Hank on, and the first segment was all about the ideal wide receiver for the Sean Payton offense. And we basically described T-Mac line by line, and then it was like, well, okay, they're not going to be able to get him. So we started looking at the Tre Harrises and the Tory Hortons and those guys. I didn't realize he was this productive as a freshman on just 39 receptions, 702 yards, 18 yards per catch, and 8 touchdowns. Incredible. And yeah, you're right. I don't think it's talked about enough, but if you watch Arizona, there's some inside-outside versatility where they did use him as a big slot.
And you could see, how he grew from that freshman year. I think he became a better route runner. I mean, that's just not his calling card. If you're going into it looking for someone who can, truly separate in their routes, that's not his game. We'll get into some other guys who that is their game. But he's just a physical presence, and you could see it when he was 18 years old as a true freshman, dominating 22, 23-year-old kids in the Pac-12, and that progression kept going. It's just a constant upward trajectory with him, and I think that that's something you want on your NFL team.
Yeah, 100%. I just think he would be such a slam dunk pick with how we're paying wide receivers. Like, for me, a medium outcome for him is like T. Higgins. Higgins just got almost quarterback money.
Yeah, that's a good comp.
How would you pass on him? It seems to me like in some ways the NFL hasn't adjusted in the draft to how the NFL sees wide receivers in free agency and trades.
Yes.
Because it's like, if you think all these wide receivers are worth trading a future first round pick or are worth paying 30, 40 million a year, then we should be seeing like 3 or 4 go in the top 15 every year.
Yeah.
And we're not really seeing that. And teams are just having Jackson Smith and Jigbas and Justin Jeffersons and Jordan Addisons just kind of drop in their laps later on in the first round or beyond. And I've tried to adjust my rankings to the way they do reflect how wide receivers are valued in this league.
Yeah.
Where we don't talk about them as the second most valuable position in football. But if they're not they might be 2B, like it's really not that far off.
Especially in like Denver's case with a young quarterback. Like, just give him more options.
Yep, 100%. I mean, it's been the problem with the Texans. They're trying to. Tank Dell's hurt. They tried the Stephon Diggs thing, didn't totally work out. they're really lucky Nico Collins, a high upside
sure.
wide receiver, has really panned out for him. But that was a completely different offense when Nico was out. So all that to say, T-Mac for me is a set and forget top 5 prospect in this class.
If his name is on the board when the Broncos are picking, they better sprint up to the commissioner's desk with that card.
100%, because he is the perfect fit for this offense and just great value, and I think is a prospect profile I can really trust and checks off a lot of those key boxes I'm looking for when I'm trying to hedge my bets and stack a board. So yeah, I don't get it at all. I think this is all smoke. It would make no sense for me to see him drop out of the top 10, forget the top 15.
Absolutely. I mean, where's he on your board? And just in terms of
5th.
Yeah, exactly.
5th. Travis Shador, Abdul Carter, Ashton Genty, and then it's T-Mac.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's, if not, just a premium player, on the fringe of being a premium player in terms of pure talent and just stacking the board of guys you want to add to your team. So, yeah, I mean, all this stuff, I mean, I don't care about it. I really don't. The whole drama the last week over his 40 time, I've seen so many plays where he does run away from people, like long touchdowns that he scores at Arizona. Like, speed was never a concern of mine, and that's just, frankly, not his game. If you're expecting him to be, Tyreek Hill-ish out there, just like running around people and just breaking away when the second he has daylight, like that's just not his game. He's just he's a beast, man. He's a monster.
100%. What really stands out to me too is his feet. He has such quick feet. He's such a technician and kind of known where to put that right foot outside to then set you up to overcommit and then take you back inside and win leverage that way. His feet play quicker than that big frame should. And that's part of what has me really intrigued by Tetairoa McMillan. Honestly, kind of similar to some of the smoke we've heard on Will Johnson.
Yeah.
Where it's like, don't overthink this, man. A guy that size with those skills at a premium position, it's just like, yeah, that's a set and forget top 10 pick.
This is where we're at in draft season. Don't forget about the film, man. Like, what you saw from September to November is what truly matters.
Yep.
And there's a reason, that a lot of these guys, we see a lot of risers and fallers at this point, and it's because people just tend to overthink it. I mean, there's some data points you can learn, an injury at some point, or I don't know, whatever off the field stuff. But when it comes to, we're talking about this guy's 40, I just can't get into it.
No, and I mean, I think we get lost. What's that? The forest past the trees?
Yeah, I can't see the forest through the trees.
Yeah, because, data point. Guys, the most relevant data point to future success is college production. And no one can match his college production. I mean, no one in this class. So why are we overanalyzing these other data points, but not letting the one that actually matters the most take us to the promised land? Honestly, big AJ Green vibes for him.
I could see that definitely.
Who also ran a low 4.5. Don't remember that mattering at all. Never once was I watching AJ Green in the NFL and being like, if you just ran a 4.4.
I love your T. Higgins comp.
He's also a nice, safe one for me, I think.
Yeah, it's just the ability to play. He's got great ball skills too. Like, if Travis Hunter wasn't in this draft class and wasn't being talked about as a wide receiver, I think we'd be talking about Tetairoa McMillan as some of the best ball skills in this wide receiver class. I mean, he makes some of the craziest catches you'll watch from all these guys.
And he makes one-handed grabs like it's nothing.
Did that to Travis, actually, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just not going to overthink it. And I would be beyond ecstatic if the Broncos ended up with him a month from now on that Thursday night.
100%. We're going to take a quick break and then get into all the other wide receivers in this class and Jake's thoughts with the current state of that wide receiver room. But first, a shout out to our friends right here at Coors Light, the mountains turning blue right behind me. And boy, this read is perfect for a day like today because I've been running around, doing different stuff, catching up on these wide receivers. So I'm prepped to talk ball with you. Going through some old stats. So I'm prepped to talk ball with Benny Fowler on the show an hour ago. Got all my dogs in. It's a fun day. It's what I just described, a dream day for every American out there. But it's been a lot of things. I've been going the whole time. I cannot wait to finish this pod, go downstairs, choose chill, go into the Coors Light mini fridge we have right there, grab myself a cold one with the mountains turning blue, and just relax and watch some college hoops, watch some dogs come through for me. I mean, it's Coors Light, man. I couldn't get away with day drinking most other beers. They're just too heavy for me.
Facts.
But Coors, it's so nice and chill. It goes down so smoothly. And it's Colorado through and through. Choose chill this winter and then reach for Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door by visiting CoorsLight.com/DNVR, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. And, of course, our dear friends at Bet365. Bet365, a must-have app this time of year, where I'm betting every single underdog in March Madness straight up on the money line. And on top of that, as if that wasn't enough, they've got a 15-point protection for you. So if my dog takes a 15-point lead, bang, bang, straight cash, homie.
On to the next game.
It's just incredible. I mean, what this does in increasing my margins is epic. So Bet365, man, the only place you can do any of this stuff, and the only place you can use our special code DNVR365 at sign up. Get in on the fun. Place a $10 minimum deposit, $5 minimum bet, and they will hook you up with $150 in bonus bets. Win or lose, boom. They're in the account to play with for you as soon as that bet is settled one way or another. Now it's just a great time to get in on the fun if you haven't already. Must be 21 plus and physically located in Colorado. Please gamble responsibly. If you, someone you know, has a gambling problem, wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Okay, Jakester. I'm glad we had the T-Mac talk, because it's like, two things are true at once. He'd be a no-brainer for the Broncos, but I don't think he's a realistic target, because I think he will be gone by like pick 8 to the Panthers.
Yeah. I mean, this could totally be a smokescreen or just a media situation where they're just overthinking it, and come April, he's going in the top 10. It's like, oh yeah, of course this should happen. Like, this is just who he is.
Well, look at this Toyota chat from Jose saying he's on the fence about going wide receiver in round 1, but lining up Sutton, T-Mac, Vele, and Ingram would be epic. Yeah.
I mean, you'd need to go, if you're playing the Broncos, if that's the situation, you need to have like 2 or 3 corners over 6'3" to even really have a chance in the red zone, let alone like the big play threat.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you should just start an anti-bullying campaign for all the AFC West secondaries, because that's what would happen to them. They would get bullied. They would get bodied. They would be just absolutely abused. After that, Travis Hunter, we don't need to talk about. He'll be long gone for the Broncos pick. That we don't need any smoke about. After that, who's your wide receiver 3?
I'm falling in love with Emeka Egbuka.
How could you not? How could you not, Jake?
He does everything.
Clean profile.
Yes.
Very clean profile.
The all-time leader in receptions at Ohio State, which has brought out Marvin Harrison Jr.
Dang.
I mean, all these guys, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave.
David Boston.
I mean, yes, just it keeps going on and on.
Yeah.
He's caught more passes than all of them. And he was an impact player, kind of like T-Mac. As a true freshman, came in and had a fantastic season. And then, Marvin Harrison Jr. is on this team. He's got Jeremiah Smith this year. I think he's just gotten a little bit overshadowed because of the wild talent that those two guys have. But if you look at how Ohio State and how Chip Kelly used Egbuka this last year, he was a chess piece for them, man. He was lining up in the backfield. He'd line up tight. He'd line up in the slot. He'd line out wide.
Yes.
He's great off the line of scrimmage. I love his route running. He catches everything. The only complaint I really have about him is after the catch, he's somewhat limited. He's just not.
Yeah.
You haven't really seen very much explosive plays,
Mm-hmm.
just crazy run after the catch. But in terms of a separator and pure receiver, like he's very smart. I mean, you can see that off the film just because of how much they ask of him. He's always going to be where the quarterback expects him to be. He finds the soft spots in coverage. He wins off the line of scrimmage, can beat man. I love him, man. He'd be a fantastic fit, I think, for the Broncos.
Yeah, and when you're going into the draft, he's not going to have this outlandish ceiling that some of these guys have. Like, we'll get into Savion Williams at some point. Through the roof. You could make a Megatron comp to that guy and no one would say a word about it. That's where Egbuka falls short. The ceiling isn't, you can't dream on him becoming Megatron. But everything you just listed, I mean, what better indicators of future success than checking off all those boxes?
Mm-hmm.
And it comes down to that inside-outside versatility is something that once I saw Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp really explode at the NFL level, a slot wide receiver or a wide receiver with slot ability who also possesses size, I think is a cheat code in the NFL because that's how you beat these sub packages. And when you're such a good route technician, when you're a good physical blocker in the run game, you have sure hands. You're so good at like using your body and wiggling your way open. It's just like, yeah, you're going to have success and you're probably going to have success at a pretty high level for a decent amount of time.
He reminds me of, kind of like that Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. Like him on the Rams would be a dream for Sean McVay, I think. And that's something we talked about when they brought in Josh Reynolds last year, right? Like, yes, give me all the Sean McVay wide receivers. They've been able to handle a lot mentally. They can line up all over the field and do a variety of things. This is just the next level of that. I mean, he's not going to be Cooper Kupp right away, even if he does have a ceiling like that. I'm not expecting that out of him, but he could be a chess piece for Sean Payton. And another thing that we've talked about in terms of this team moving forward through this offseason, I want this to be like the most versatile offense in the NFL. Like, that's what I think Sean really wants to do. We've talked the Joker thing to death. You get that in Evan Ingram. We're talking about getting more dynamic at running back. Shit, Bo Nix mossed a guy earlier this year. You know what I mean? Like, so adding a guy like Emeka Egbuka, I think, is just another piece to that puzzle and could really help open up this offense even more and make it even harder to defend.
100%. And I see him all over the board. He's 9th on my board. I mean, he could not be higher. I love this kid. And that's 9th overall, all positions. Jose chiming in with, I get it now. He's what Judy was supposed to be. Where I'd counter is I thought Judy was more explosive.
Yes, for sure.
His route running maybe even a tick up.
Absolutely.
Judy, what I always said was his ceiling was also a smidge limited because he didn't necessarily have elite speed and he didn't necessarily have elite size. And we would see that show up on 50-50 balls, on contested catches over the middle, where you needed to have that extra oomph of physical specialness to come down with those. And that's where he wouldn't, necessarily. And then we kind of saw that translate all too well in the NFL, where like that physicality started showing up in the drops. You know,
exactly. And it was the hands thing too. I mean, Egbuka, as I said, 205 receptions, most in Ohio State history. Had 81 this last year. Had some injuries in 23, only 41, but in 22, when Marvin Harrison Jr. was going crazy, he had 74.
Yeah. And then, I mean, having multiple years of that kind of production really stands out to me as well.
I mean, it's crazy. Like you just said, 74 for 1,151 yards and 10 touchdowns. That was just overshadowed by someone who went even crazier that year. Same this last season, 81 receptions, 1,011 yards, 10 touchdowns. Like, any other team and prospect, like we'd be going like, oh, this is a slam dunk. But because Jeremiah Smith is just taking, the top off the defense, running wild like crazy, he gets overshadowed a bit.
Yeah, 100%. It's true. And it's kind of what's happening with these Ohio State wide receivers. Like they get overshadowed and then they come to the NFL and it's like, oh, wow, they're insane. Broncos tube on the Toyota chat saying he'd love to take Jeremiah Smith right now. Yeah,
absolutely.
You and me both, brother. I think he'd be wide receiver 1, not named Travis Hunter.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Crazy. How do you feel? We've got a question about Golden here. Is Golden's 40 time the only thing propelling him ahead of Egbuka now? The second half of the season, we started to get some real Matthew Golden hype.
Yep.
And in the playoffs, he went off. And the SEC championship, he looked really good. So he had a good postseason, if you will. How would you feel about his fit with the Broncos, though?
I mean, I'd love him too. I think you add something that they don't really have in terms of someone who could truly take the top off the defense with that speed.
Really
I do
explosive.
think that question's valid, though. I think that the 40 time, not many people expected him to run, what was it, 4.29?
Yeah, he went off.
I don't think anyone expected him to run that. I don't think anyone expected him to be the fastest wide receiver. So I think that's a lot of where his draft stock is coming from. But just a weird career, transferred in from Texas, from Houston to Texas. Didn't really do much this season until it got down to crunch time. I mean, November, December, he went crazy and you could really see the potential. And it was kind of everything too. I mean, he has the speed and he was doing this on like a high ankle sprain too, towards the end of the year. But he was making crazy catches along the sideline. He gets separation. So I like him a lot too.
I love his compete level
Yes.
at the top of the route stem and then at the end of the route, which is the catch point.
Yeah.
Very competitive.
Absolutely.
Got some dog in him for sure. Hard to bring down.
And
What have you?
I think offers more run after the catch than Egbuka does at this point too.
100%. I mean,
So-
he's got way more juice. I do think he's a bit of an overlap with Mims.
Mm-hmm.
Mims more yak ability, maybe more of a danger ball in his hands.
Mhm.
Golden more twitched up,
Yes.
more refined as a wide receiver, probably.
But like, I think you can take someone that has a similar skill set to Mims and not overshadow what Mims did this last year and what he could potentially become. Like, you could still line up Mims in the backfield and have Golden out wide. Like,
Yep.
I don't think that it's, you can't have one without, kind of diminishing what you've already been building with
100%.
Mims.
Yeah, and one of those guys could be your outside speed threat, take it off the top. The other one could be the slot. In fact, I
Mhm.
think Golden could be quite the weapon from the slot.
Mhm.
Another part of his game I like. Luther Burden, the third, also has some slot versatility. Where
Yeah.
does he slot in the Egbuka Golden dilemma? Because he's an interesting one. I mean, Hank and I were looking up wide receivers who underperformed their final draft year and had under 700 receiving yards.
Yeah.
It's like Darius Hayward-Bay. There was one other bust. I was remembering Jordan Addison, but he
Mhm.
still had 800 receiving yards that final year at USC.
Yeah, and was in a loaded wide receiving core too.
We were struggling to find recent guys. And yet, like, Fran Duffy loves him. When I put the South Carolina game on, it's got a one-handed, what should have been a game-winning touchdown catch until the Mizzou defense blows the lead with a minute left. And it's not the winning catch because they lost.
I was so high on him coming into this season, and then he really just laid an egg. You look early though, and like they have some games where it's just like, what can he do? Like they blow out Murray State and Buffalo to start the season. He has like 7 catches combined. Like I totally get it because you don't need him on the field when you're up 24-0 against those type of teams. They had some bad losses too, like Texas A&M. They lost by 31. They lost to Alabama 34-0. He had 10 combined catches in those games for 85 yards. Like, what can he do? So I do think there's some of that, but there's also some really bad drops on his tape from this last year. But in terms of after the catch, he's one of, if not the best wide receivers in this class. When he secures the catch and has some space, he's a pure weapon.
The juice to
Debo-esque.
his game is very intriguing. Yeah, Debo-esque, it's true, because he's bigger than you might think. Like, I think he's over 200 pounds. And he's got some inside-outside versatility. And it's like, of all the guys we've talked about in these first 2 segments, he's the one who's most Joker-esque.
Yes,
Because
definitely.
he's just like, find ways to put the ball in his hand, move him around, put him in motion, whatever you got to do.
Yeah.
And this this guy will reward you for putting the ball in his
Yeah,
hands.
he's a weapon in the screen game. He gets reverses. Egbuka does that too. He gets a lot of reverses and handoffs out of the backfield. So don't sleep on him in that regard. But
Good point.
Burden does have, I think, in terms of after the catch again, like Egbuka that's the one area where I just really wish he had more. Like if he had Burden's skills after the catch, he'd be, up there with T-Mac for me. It's just like set and forget. Like it's over. Like just draft him top 10. Don't even think about it. But in terms of Burden, there's a lot to like, but there are some questions, some valid questions I think that came up from this season.
100%. I want to get into how these guys stack up against the RB2 options. We've got some good comments from Jose. I also noticed something about Zach Stevens' parlance, so I want to pose you this question when we come back from the break. But first, a word from our partners at Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL. You guys know trucks, SUVs, they are part of Toyota's DNA. It's why it is a great, dare I say, the perfect Colorado car to get lost in the mountains, take the fam on a nice little road trip. You ever have a day like that where it's like, just drive west, just drive west. Let's find a few mountain towns. Let's get lost here for a little bit.
I need more of them in my life.
You honestly do. You honestly do. Maybe we'll do that. I'll show you the plot of land I've got out by South Park. Where
Hell yeah.
We can just camp out and do whatever.
Let's do it.
But yeah, man, Toyota, what a great partner they've been. What a great car they are. Anyone on our staff who has a Toyota swears by it. The convenience, just what a great, reliable machine they are. And you had an experience with Toyota customer care as you guys had a flat
Yes.
on your way back from Boulder, and they took good care of you
They
there
did.
too. So, I mean, no better personal endorsement than that right there. Visit your Front Range Toyota stores at a location near you. AutoNation Toyota, Arapahoe and Centennial, Corwin Toyota in Boulder, Groove Toyota in Littleton, Mountain States Toyota in Denver, Stevenson Toyota East in Aurora, Stevenson Toyota West in Lakewood. Toyota, the official automotive partner of the NFL and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. Holy cow. The madness from downstairs. You can hear it. McNeese State going off, Riley? Is that what's happening? Incredible. I mean, DNVR, man. Get in on our events. Come to the DNVR bar. Be part of this fun. Come and check out thednvr.com/events to see and get tickets to our draft party. We're doing that at Stoney's. We'll be on a stage going through all of round one. It's going to be an absolute blast. Cannot miss. If you're hardcore Draft Pod listeners, you don't want to miss out on that. So check that out, thednvr.com/events. That's the good stuff. And then also, I would say become a diehard today, where you can take advantage of discounts on all these events. You can get discounts at the bar. You can get discounts on our outstanding merch. Right now, it's just a great season. My guys out here going to Boulder every single day. We've got Scott Proctor on that bus beat, writing some great stuff. Justin Michaels dominating the Rams beat right now. We've got all sorts of awesome draft content coming out. All Fran Duffy's stuff. Zach Stevens just published the Broncos only mock draft for us. He's got a punter in there, so real ball knower stuff. Just don't miss out. TheDNVR.com. Check it out, baby. And yeah, great stuff. So, okay, so we talked about these top wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel for the Broncos? The conundrum would be if an Egbuka, a Luther Burden III, a Matthew Golden were around at pick 20, and the other option you're staring in the face is one of these second tiers of running backs, the Travion Hendersons, the Amarian Hamptons, Quinshawn Judkins, maybe the Caleb Johnsons or the Dylan Sampsons. Because I get the feeling you would go heavily towards wide receiver. So less so what the answer is, but why is that the conclusion you come to?
I mean, there's only one player, I think, from that group of running backs that I like Hampton, but Travion Henderson to me could absolutely do something that none of these other running backs can really do if the Broncos were to grab him. I love his speed. I love his hands. I love his pass pro. Have you seen his pass pro highlights?
His pass pro is so awesome.
Oh
man.
my God. So he's someone that I love, but in terms of if I had to pick a position,
Trayvon's very Egbuka-y.
yes.
Like, we were very hyped about him early in his career.
Exactly.
Got sidelined by injuries, forgot about him a little overshadowed by Quinshon Judkins being their big transfer signing from Ole Miss. And then in the playoffs just goes nutty on us. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, Travion Henderson, damn.
Mm-hmm. I do think, though, taking a wide receiver would be more beneficial to Bo. You can just grab running backs. I want 2 running backs. I'm not trying to say that
100%.
we don't need running backs, but I think you can get away with taking one, with your second pick in the second round, and then maybe another one day 3 if you want to take someone like an Egbuka or a Golden in the first round. I just think that makes the offense better immediately, because the drop off, I think, from that group of wide receivers to the next group, who I think we're going to get into here. To me, that's more than the group of running backs, from Genty, Hampton, Henderson to the next guys.
Agreed.
So to me, that's why I think I would value wide receiver more at that point. But again, I love Travion Henderson so much that I don't know if I'd be able to resist. Even if it's like Egbuka versus Travion Henderson, I think I'm probably going Travion Henderson.
No, I really enjoy Travion Henderson, and he really is a back who I look at him and I'm like,
yeah, I think RK said his dream draft is Golden in the first and Henderson in the second. I don't think Henderson's going to be there.
No way, man. And he's just one of those guys where it's give him to Sean Payton at your own risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Because what Sean's going to be able to pull off with this kid would be lunatic. And then the other hard part of this, because it's literally the conundrum I'm facing when stacking my board, is the positional value part of it all,
Yeah, look, what I figured is how I would do it if I was in this position as an NFL decision maker. And it's what Move the Sticks talks about, DJ and Bucky, all the time. It's the P's: passer, pass catcher, pass protector. That's how you win on offense. I mean, yes, the running backs are having, a bit of a resurgence right now. Shout out to Saquon and all that, but and the Broncos desperately need one. But
yes,
in terms of ultimately, which is the most important part of this franchise's development right now, is getting Bo Nix as close to that ceiling as possible. You got to surround him with pass catchers. Go back to the playoff game, for instance. How many drops did we have that game? 4, 5, 6? And the Broncos, I don't think were winning that game, even if they caught those passes. But you can start to see, how the team could, not really match up to Bo Nix in his level, what he's playing at right now. And I think a lot of it because of those wide receivers, tight end, of course, too. But, with Ingram in the mix now, I think that they've fixed that.
Goes a long way for sure. No, you're right. I just think the value of wide receiver cannot be neglected. Now, I also wonder how many of these guys would I actually rate ahead of Troy Franklin, who I was super high on last year, right? And it's knowing what I know now, it's probably just behind this group, the group of the Goldens, the LB3s, the Egbukas. So that's where you get into by drafting a wide receiver high, are you taking away opportunities from these other young wide receivers to develop and have a path to become stars themselves in this offense?
I don't think that's the case, though. I think you want those guys to go out and compete. Go prove that you can be that for me by adding another guy in there. I don't want to just have to default go to them and throw them in the game because it's what I have. If you bring in someone like a Golden and Egbuka, let's see Troy Franklin step up then. Can you become that deep threat? Can you fulfill that role we drafted you as? Same with Vele. I think we're all encouraged with the progression we saw with him. Can you take it even further this next year? That's my whole thing with this thing, because I think a lot of people saw the potential in this receiving group last year from Mims, Vele, Franklin specifically, and they're saying, let's not mess it up by adding another one. I don't think you mess it up by adding another one, though. I think that you make the room deeper and better, and if those guys can't, if they're not up to the challenge, if they can't live up to that challenge, then that's the NFL, buddy. Let's go get more then.
Yeah. It's a very Coach Prime approach of you.
Thank you.
Right? We're never satisfied with the amount of talent we have. We are going to keep adding talent, keep adding competition, And that's what's going to make us better as a football program.
Absolutely.
And I mean, who could argue with that? Who could argue with that reasoning?
That's just, I think that's, again, to use the phrase that you used earlier, I think we're losing the forest through the trees when we look at this wide receiving core and we look at, the potential. Everyone falls in love with potential, right? That's what we do in the draft. We fall in love with the potential. And I think we've fallen a little bit too much in love with the potential of the current receiving room. And we're just going, yeah, we're fine. And assuming that some of these guys are going to take these jumps when in reality, that's kind of a risk. And we could end up in a similar, if not worse situation this next year if those guys do not hit those marks.
100%,
that's where I'm at.
100%. And it should also be mentioned, like, if the Broncos were as high on Troy Franklin as I'm as high on Troy Franklin, they draft him a lot earlier than the first pick of the fourth round.
Yeah.
Or the second pick, whatever it was. Also, Bradley, I see your comment about the comp to Hampton that you're seeing on X is LT.
That's what I think.
I don't think that's correct. That's wrong. I've said Joe Mixon. I've said Joe Mixon
I've
for
seen
a
that a
long
lot.
time, and I look, Joe Mixon without off-field stuff is a first rounder. He went to
Absolutely.
like top 40 even with the off-field stuff. So,
Lance Zierlein has Ramondre Stevenson as his NFL comp.
whoa.
I don't know if I
That's
agree
a
with that.
wagon.
Yeah.
You're comparing him to the wagon? I don't know about that. Holy cow.
Yeah.
It's got to put on a lot of weight to get to Ramondre Stevenson.
He measured in at
levels.
221 at the combine.
He's big.
Yeah,
And for being 220 plus and then ran a 4.4. So, I mean,
for sure.
look, no hate on Omarion Hampton. He's a very good running back prospect who checks off a lot of boxes. Very safe prospect profile for him as well. Okay, let's get into some of these other wide receivers. Probably more candidates at pick 51 and beyond.
Sure.
And I kind of wanted to focus on those ideal Sean Payton wide receiver types.
Okay.
So we're looking at big guys. We're looking at guys who could be nice outside wide receivers and complement Courtland Sutton nicely.
Mm-hmm.
Complement Mims and Troy Franklin nicely. Give you an alternative to Devon Vele. And I started with Tre Harris, who's kind of like, if you can't get your big wide receiver in T-Mac, Tre Harris, the Ole Miss wide receiver, Jackson Dart's favorite weapon, is not a terrible consolation prize.
No.
He came off a really nice season like Dart. They were just running through the non-conference schedule, got slowed down a little bit by the conference schedule, but still had an extraordinary year. He's still young. He's tall. He runs pretty fast. What do you think of Tre Harris and his fit with the Broncos?
I really like Tre Harris.
Yeah.
He is kind of like Tet McMillan light, I think.
Uh-huh.
He makes some crazy catches. I think he's underrated in terms of his size as a route runner.
Yeah.
I like how he gains separation. And I think his combine time was like 4.54 or something like that. Like, it wasn't eye-popping, but he's got instances when you watch the tape that the guy is just running downfield wide open. He can get himself open with his speed. I think he really, when in his routes,
4.54 on the money. Good
exactly.
job.
So with his tempo and his routes, I think that's what gets him open. And because of his frame, and even at 4.54, like, that's a lot for some cornerbacks to handle, and he can get himself open. Struggled with injuries this last year. Had a groin hip injury.
Yep.
He only played 8 games, but still had 60 receptions for 1,030 yards and 7 touchdowns.
Crazy.
He is an older prospect, so that gives you a little bit of hesitation, I think.
Yep.
But in terms of what I saw this last year and just being one of the best receivers in the SEC, he's done that. So
100%. And he's 6'2", 205. That offense is wonky. That's a tough offense to evaluate when you're taking every other play off.
And Tennessee's like that too, man, which
Yep.
we'll get to. But
Yep.
yeah.
100%. But I think you could do a lot worse than Tre Harris. I think he's a fun, good-sized outside wide receiver to build off and add to this group. Tory Horton did not run slow. Kind of surprisingly ran already at the combine and lit it up after a All-American couple type level seasons. And yeah, has a devastating ACL injury, which we thought was going to just plummet his draft stock. And that's where people were ranking him post-injury, way lower than the guy who was getting mocked in the first or at worst second round in the preseason. But then after that combine performance has picked himself right back up and been really impressive. And this is a guy who's returned punts to the house, so the long speed is there. And earlier in his career, you saw more of a like deep threat wide receiver,
right?
Who I think as he progressed really became more of a route technician, really became a guy who could really work the sidelines, work the boundary, has really nice refined footwork, is good at making catches away from his body, like safe hands, and like overcame not the best quarterback play at times.
Absolutely,
and was able to be really successful. So as long as your medical staff is checking off on it, I think even at 51 wouldn't be that rich for Tory Horton.
He's awesome. He's great. Lost some momentum, decided to come back for this last year and just injuries, BFN, he did the best that he could at times, Tory Horton, with what BFN was giving him. And I thought he exceeded a lot of those expectations. If he played with, a Shedeur Sanders, a Jackson Dart, a lot of these guys who are, his numbers are insane because he gets open. You can scheme him open. He's a threat in the screen game. As you mentioned, he can be sort of a deep threat. He's got real speed, as we saw at the combine. He'd be like we were talking about earlier, if you take Tet McMillan, you have this just group of monsters that you line up at wide receiver on the perimeter with the Broncos. But if you take Tory Horton, he gives you something you don't have. Someone who can just get themselves open on like a slant, a whip route, just because of how he moves and how he runs his routes. So I'd love him as well.
And a real yak threat. Weighed in at 196 at the combine when he ran that 4.41, which I thought was heavier than I expected. When you look at him, he looks wiry.
Yeah, he's long.
I worry that maybe that frame is a little skinny and could take a beating, but that's honestly one of the few criticisms I can levy his way. I think Tory Horton staying in Colorado, going to the Broncos could really be an exciting pick. Let's get into Savion Williams. I think he's next on the list. What can't you say about this just insane wide receiver playmaker, really, for the TCU Horned Frogs?
Just a physical specimen.
Truly.
He's a monster. He plays wide receiver and running back, and he's like equally as good at both.
6'4", 222, and he's doing that.
He's a unicorn. If I'm Sean Payton, I'm looking at him with hearts in my eyes, man. I'd love to have him on this offense. We've talked a lot about the Joker. I don't really, Evan Ingram is going to be that in the passing game, obviously. But in terms of what Taysom Hill was doing for the Saints, Savion Williams is probably the closest thing in terms of, you can play the Wildcat quarterback. You can line him up kind of like what we were talking about with Egbuka. You can line him up in the backfield, slot, wide. You can line him up tight. He's just a chess piece on offense. Does struggle with some drops. I think that's one of the big things that you're going to hear.
Consistency in the hands is definitely a thing.
So like his comp is like Cordell Patterson. You know what I mean?
Yep, it really is. Would you rather his primary position be running back so he can be a true joker?
Like what Mims's position is what he should be.
Yeah.
Send him out on deep routes, scheme him open, play him in the screen game, get him some handoffs, some swings out of the backfield. If you're expecting him to go out there and route up defensive backs on, digs and posts and whip routes and stuff like that, I just don't think you're really going to get that from him. But he's just such a special athlete that I'd just be enticed by that and, maybe throw him at kick return or something. Like the guy he did that his freshman year, hasn't done it since, but 14 kick returns for 312 yards. That's 22.3 yards per return. He's just a weapon with the ball in his hand. So, in terms of NFL coaches, what coach is better just getting the ball in the hands of their athletes than Sean Payton?
100%. That's where he'd be really exciting. He's a guy we have had our eye on specifically because of how he would work in Sean Payton's offense.
Led all wide receivers with 43 total missed tackles forced. Next best was 32 this last year.
Yeah, he's a freak. And of these bigger wide receivers, we're going to get into two of the bigger ones in the Stanford kid and Jayden Higgins from Iowa State in a second. He is so fluid. Like his hips are so fluid, man. He just changes direction so seamlessly for a big guy like that. I mean, it really is like freakish Demaryius Thomas Megatron type stuff that he's able to do at that size. The drops concern me. He's going to be a developmental project, but if you can get him anywhere close to his full potential,
I mean, he's a game changer.
Watch out.
Absolutely.
You are in big trouble. So I saw a comment. I think they're talking about Savion Williams saying, why would you need a scat back? You already have a scat back. If 6'4", 222 sounds like a scat back to you, my friend, then we have a very different definition. Though I love the Toyota chat and I love the support. So thank you so much, Hal. I'm just saying that might be a little crazy. Also, leave us a thumbs up. Come all to the Toyota chat. Can we get through these last two wide receivers before we're done? Elic Ayomanor, Stanford, kind of a draft Twitter favorite, though I think the buzz has slowed down after everyone was throwing out the most stupid numbers for him to run. And he ran a 4.4, which for a 6'2", 200-pound guy is very good, but I think underwhelmed some people. Also, he will never be as good as he was in that game against Colorado, going against a beat-up, returned from injury Travis Hunter. You got to see this guy live and in the flesh, and we've got to have him on our radars for like 2 years right now. What stands out to you about Ayomanor?
I love the combination of size and speed.
Yes.
Listed at 6'2", 206, so not like massive and completely physically imposing, like, you know,
not
potentially
nor
or
Jayden
T-Mac.
Higgins. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yes. But he's kind of a tier below that. So, and kind of like T-Mac as well, makes some of the wildest catches you will see. He really has great ball skills. Has a good catch radius too for someone like, you know, that big and that fast. You know, you don't really associate that type of skill set with guys like that, but he's got that.
100%. Twitched up kind of for a big guy.
Definitely. He's just another type of, he's got to polish himself. Like I do think, wonder, you know, when he goes against the bigger corners, like, can you get off of press? You know, can you run routes to get yourself open? That type of stuff. But in terms of just immediately coming into Sean Payton's offense, he'd fit the archetype. Absolutely. He's massive.
100%.
Or not massive, but he's big enough to be imposing at times, and he can be a red zone weapon.
Yeah, for sure. The athleticism for his size definitely stands out. It's a lot of comebacks that they have him doing at Stanford, and he's good in those. It's comebacks and then deep routes where like there's far too many corners, like playing trail technique, just like glued to his backside. And he can make the really nice tough catches and adjustments midair and stuff.
Yeah,
and then we'll kind of have some pedestrian drops and stuff. And
right.
Of all the wide receivers we're talking about, I think by far the toughest watch, because the quarterback play he's getting to support him is just brutal. Also,
it is.
What's his hometown there?
Medicine Hat, Alberta.
What the Medicine Hat? We're naming towns Medicine Hat out in Alberta. If we have a Canadian in our Toyota chat, I would love for you to expand on that for me. So you could do a lot worse. At 51, it would feel rich for me.
It would. He's a young player, though. I think he's like 21 years old. He only played 3 years, just redshirted, and then played the last 2 seasons and made an impact. So in terms of the progression of his development, I think you're just starting to scratch the surface potentially. So that would get me excited. But yeah, 51 would be... I'd have to see who else is on the board and who else has come off at that point.
Oh, and I teased this before the second break, but I then never followed through. I noticed today that Zach says pass rush.
Pass rush?
Yeah. It's a pass rush. Yeah, he's one of those.
Yeah, we got to fix that.
I know. We'll have to work on it. Okay, final guy, Jayden Higgins, another mountain of a man, 6'4", 214. So not just tall, but he's got some weight behind him. And kind of shocked everyone running a 4.47, 39-inch vertical, almost an 11-foot broad jump. Those are really impressive numbers. That'll force you to go back to the tape. When I go back to the tape, I still see a guy that at the start of the route takes a second to get going. In my old Italian draft pod, we would call those diesel engines. Takes a second to get up to full speed.
Right.
And that's how I describe Jayden Higgins. He uses his body really well. So, not twitched up by Ayomanor, but uses his body better. I think is really good on contested grabs and what have you. Can flash on some deeper routes. And he's another guy. Add Jayden Higgins to this receiver room. And teams are going to have their hands full with him, Vele, Sutton, and Ingram. He's a big, imposing guy. So again, maybe I'd feel like 51 would be a smidge rich for him too, even though the testing numbers would warrant first round consideration.
Sure. He's massive too. Bigger than Elic Ayomanor, who we just talked about. 6'4", 214.
Big.
And I do like how he moves, but I get what you're saying. I wish there was just more juice to him. It doesn't really match up to me with the 40. I could see that maybe in top end speed. If you just let him run a straight 9, absolutely, makes sense. But open field leaves some to be desired. Had great production this last year, though.
Yeah.
87 receptions, 1,183 yards, and 9 touchdowns.
Florida boy.
Trying to find, where did he play? Because I only see stuff for him the last 2 years at Iowa State. Where was he before?
I think he's only played the last 2 years. Does it come up under stats? So he must be a little younger too, huh?
I think he played at a lower level before. I just don't know where.
Yeah, he's just 22.
Eastern Kentucky, I think.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
He turned 22 in December.
Yeah, he's got a nice profile. It's just
very Sean Payton-y.
Yeah, I could see this being a guy that Sean takes a chance on, and I wouldn't mind taking him at all. Maybe round 3, day 3, even if he's still on the board. I like other guys more, though.
You do?
Yeah.
I like that about you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this wide receiver class, do you have a special bay you'd throw out there? Your guy?
Savion Williams, I can't get enough of that dude. I just love watching him so much. I'll throw out a guy who maybe isn't being talked about enough, who had a decent combine. Isaac Tesla out of Arkansas.
Dude,
have you watched him?
Tesla stuff has picked up. And the Buffs were in on him hard, right? And then it didn't happen because he went to Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
Then he disappoints at Arkansas somewhat.
Yep.
And then blew it up at the combine, so the hype has returned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tell me all about him. We've got 2.5 minutes.
He came on my radar 2 years ago because Colorado was recruiting him out of the portal, and I think he was coming. I don't know if it was JUCO, but it was definitely a lower level that he was coming up. Another guy with the size, 6'4", 214 pounds, and then he goes out and runs a 4.43 40-yard dash, has a 6.85 3-cone.
Stupid. And a 39.5-inch vertical. World-class athlete right here.
Definitely, but it's Arkansas, they've had their moments over the last 4 or 5 years, but they've really struggled to find consistency. Yeah, especially this last year. They've really struggled to find consistency at quarterback, and that's limited a lot of these guys. Still, though, had 28 receptions, 545 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's 19.5 yards per receptions this last season. Just the combination of size and speed is something that really intrigues me, and I think he's someone that he's going to need a lot of coaching, some patience. He's not going to be an instant impact guy like a lot of the guys we just talked about. He might be someone who makes some noise in camp, and maybe you don't hear a lot from him in the season, and maybe progresses more in year 2 or 3. But I'm
great day 3 target.
Absolutely, I'm just intrigued by the profile. So,
and honestly, he feels like such a Sean Payton type target to where that's definitely a name you need to know and put in the back of your head. How do you feel about the pure slots that Jose mentions here? Restrepo, Jimmy Horn isn't a pure slot, but LeJounte would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
There's a couple of those guys in this class who it's they don't have a pure slot. They have options in the slot, both big and small. but how would you feel about more of a classic, quicker than fast? Jalen Noel from Iowa State's another one, slot wide receiver.
I mean, I think that's why I like Egbuka so much. It just gives you something you don't have. I don't think we have a pure technician route runner who you can just get open. That Sean doesn't have to scheme open. You know, he can just ask them to run this route. They know how to do it. They know how to stem it. They can get off the line, get themselves open. I love that about LeJontay. I think he can absolutely do that. Already talked about Tory.
If you're watching on OTT, jump over to our website, ddnvr.com. We're going to overtime right now, baby.
I like Restrepo too. I like the size.
Restrepo's awesome.
Yeah, he was really clutch. That was like Cam Ward's guy this last year. And I just buy stock in those guys.
100%. Also, his size and production in the same conference, very favorable to Zay Flowers, Jake.
Ooh, I like that.
Very favorable to Jake Flowers. And I know Jake Flowers for you, Zay Flowers.
Yes.
I mean, in honor of you, we should name him Jake Flowers,
Thank
no
you.
doubt. Though he did kind of get the Broncos, so it's not like he's a pot favorite anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I told you that, that's exciting stuff.
I'd love LeJontay on this team. Just being able to get himself open, he catches everything. I know people are going to look at the size and go, yeah, well, 5'10", 170, whatever he is, but it's just something the Broncos don't have. That's mostly what I'm looking for this offseason. Like, and we'll see what Sean exactly wants to do, whether he just wants to build a basketball team on the perimeter or just finding whoever fits, you know, the value given where you're picking. So I'd love Egbuka in the first. I'd love Golden as well. Like, I'm just very interested to see what direction we go with this receiving core.
100%. Same here. Thanks so much, brother. Thank you so much to y'all on the Toyota chat. Leave us a thumbs up on the way out. And big thank you to our superstar producer, Riley Sorbo. Always a pleasure, Riley. Until next week, we out.
We all silly like the mayor.